Under a video about Australian mining, a viewer asked a question that got more replies than anything else in this channel's entire comment history. 13 people answered it. 14 pressed like. Can somebody explain why Australia, with so vast mining operations, has not developed its own mining machinery industries? Where are the obstacles? It is a fair question, and it has a real answer, and the answer turns out to explain a lot more than Australia. It also explains why the same thing is true of Canada, of Chile, and of most of the countries that dig the material everything else is made from. The mining superpowers are almost never the machine builders, and that is not an accident of talent. Start with the scale of what is being asked. Australia runs some of the largest open-pit mining operations on Earth. The iron ore country in the Pilbara moves quantities of material that are difficult to picture. Haul trucks that carry 300 tons a load. Fleets that run 24 hours a day, every day, for decades. That country buys an enormous amount of heavy machinery, and an overwhelming majority of it is imported. The scale is worth holding on to, because it makes the outcome stranger. This is not a small market that got overlooked. It is one of the most concentrated buyers of ultra-class mining equipment on the planet, with decades of continuous demand and some of the most demanding operating conditions anywhere. Iron ore dust, heat, distance, and a duty cycle that never stops. If a domestic industry were ever going to grow anywhere, that is the soil. The United States is among the largest exporters into that market. Japan, China, and Germany supply most of the rest. When market analysts list the leading construction equipment brands in Australia, the names are Caterpillar, Komatsu, Volvo Construction Equipment, Hitachi Construction Machinery, Liebherr, and XCMG. Not one of them is Australian. So the obvious theory is that Australia does not build machines. That theory is wrong, and the way it is wrong is the interesting part. Australia does have a mining and construction machinery manufacturing industry. It is just concentrated in the parts of mining that never appear in the footage. Australian firms are genuinely competitive in mining software, in fine coal cleaning, in process control systems, and in strata reinforcement technology, which is the business of stopping the roof of an underground mine from coming down on the people underneath it. Those are not small industries, and they are not unskilled. They are simply invisible, because nobody films a process control system. They are also the parts of mining with the highest margin per engineer. Software and control systems scale. A haul truck does not. Whether by design or by drift, Australian industry ended up in the half of the business that pays better per head. What Australia does not build is the yellow iron. The truck, the shovel, the dozer, the loader. And the reason for that is a moat that has almost nothing to do with engineering. The moat is the dealer network and the parts portal. Think about what a mining fleet actually needs. A haul truck that stops in the Pilbara is not a machine sitting idle. It is a hole in the day's tonnage, and that tonnage is contracted. What the mine is buying is not really the truck. It is the guarantee that a part will be on site, and a technician with it, before the loss gets expensive. Before we go further, if you run the iron, or turn the wrenches on it, subscribe and turn on the bell. Delivering that guarantee across a continent the size of Australia requires depots, stock, trained people, and a system that knows which part is where at 3 in the morning. Caterpillar spent 70 years building exactly that. Komatsu built its own. A new manufacturer with a genuinely better truck still has to build all of it before the first mine will take the risk. And no mine manager gets promoted for taking that risk. If the new truck works, he saved some money. If it strands a fleet for a week during a shipping window, that is his career. The incentives at the buying end protect the incumbent just as firmly as the depots do. That is the obstacle the commenter was asking about, and it is not a technology gap. It is a logistics and trust gap, and it compounds every year that the incumbents keep operating. Now here is where the story turns, because that moat has been quietly changing hands. The same comment sections that ask why Australia builds nothing are full of Australians and Canadians naming which brand is actually in their pit now. And the name that keeps coming back is not the American one. Komatsu is king nowadays, wrote one Canadian viewer. Another named the specific operation. Sparwood is Komatsu. A third described Suncor, moving to Komatsu autonomous haul trucks in the oil sands, and then to even larger Hitachi units. An Australian operator described running Komatsu 930E trucks with a 400-ton payload and said he was not certain his outfit was still buying new ones, but the existing ones were still working. None of those people are reciting a market report. They are describing what they walk past, which is the most reliable form of market data available on this subject, and it is free. A quarterly report tells you what was invoiced. A man telling you what is parked at Sparwood tells you what was chosen. That matters, because it shows the moat is transferable. It was never a law of nature that Caterpillar held it. It was a set of depots, a stock system, and a promise about response times, and any company willing to spend 2 decades building the same thing can take it. Komatsu was willing, so was Liebherr, and the specific moment they took it was not a moment when their machines got better. It was the moment the incumbent started treating the service network as a profit center rather than a promise. You can even date it roughly by listening to when the complaints change character. For years, the complaints about Caterpillar were about price. Price complaints are healthy because a man arguing about price is still buying. The complaints only turned structural when they started being about access, permission, and waiting, and that is a different kind of customer, one who is working out his options. There is a comment under this channel's most watched video that describes that exact handover, and it was written by somebody thinking several years ahead. If the new electric trucks take too long to develop, he wrote, or the early generations are not well received, then by the time Caterpillar can get a suitable product out, Liebherr could have a dealer and service network advantage, the same thing that gave Caterpillar an advantage. 29 people liked that. It is the sharpest strategic observation in the entire corpus, and it came from a viewer. Now bring it back to the original question, because it has a second half nobody asked. Why does it matter whether Australia builds its own machines? For a long time, the answer would have been that it does not matter much. If the machines arrive, the ore moves, and where the truck was welded is somebody else's problem. That was the whole logic of a globalized supply chain, and it worked for decades. What has changed is that the countries buying the machines have started noticing how much of the operating cost is not the machine. A mine that buys a fleet is also buying a lifetime of parts pricing, software access, diagnostic permission, and service scheduling, all set by somebody on another continent. When those terms are generous, the arrangement is invisible. When they tighten, the buyer discovers exactly how little of the machine was actually sold to them. That is the same discovery the American contractor makes when the technician turns up without the part. It is just happening at national scale, to a country that moves 1 billion tons a year. And a country has options a contractor does not. A contractor can change brands. A country can change brands, or it can decide to underwrite a domestic manufacturer, or it can write procurement rules about repair access. Australia has done none of those things yet. The question in that comment section is the first stage of a country noticing it could, and that is why the question got 13 replies. So what would it actually take for a country like Australia to build its own? Not an engineering breakthrough. The engineering is well understood, and Australia has the metallurgy, the mining expertise, and the software already. It would take somebody willing to lose money on a parts network for 15 years before the first large mine signed. That is the entry cost, and it is the same entry cost that stops anybody else. It is why the list of serious global heavy equipment manufacturers has barely changed in 50 years, while entire other industries have turned over completely. The names on that list are not there because their machines are unbeatable. They are there because each of them, at some point, spent 2 decades building depots before the revenue justified it, and nobody since has been willing to repeat that. The one region that did repeat it recently is China, and it repeated it with state patience rather than private patience. XCMG and SANY now appear on the same Australian market leader lists as Caterpillar and Liebherr, which is not a sentence anybody in this industry would have written 20 years ago. Whichever way you feel about that, it is proof the moat is crossable. It just takes a kind of capital that does not need an answer by Friday. Which brings the answer back to the trait that runs under most of these stories. Building a parts network across a continent before the customers exist is not a decision a quarterly clock permits. It is a decision a patient owner permits, and there have not been many of those. Australia can mine the world without building the machines, because the machines were never really the barrier. The barrier was a promise about Tuesday morning, made by somebody with a warehouse. Subscribe if you want more of these. This channel covers the real story behind the machines, the part the dealer never puts in the brochure. And the moment that promise stops being kept, the country that has been buying yellow for 70 years will go and find whoever is keeping it next, exactly as the mines in Canada and the pits in the Pilbara have already started doing, one truck order at a time, without announcing it to anybody. The country that has been buying yellow for 70 years is not going to announce a change of policy. It will simply order differently, one fleet renewal at a time, and the first anybody outside will hear about it is a market share table 2 years later.